The train's metal wheels screamed against frozen tracks as Mikhail pressed his face to the frost-covered window. 23 years old, a mathematics teacher from a small Siberian village, he watched his life disappear into the white wilderness. One denunciation letter. That's all it took to transform him from educator to enemy of the state. Article 58. The guard spat, reading from crumpled papers. Anti-Soviet agitation. Mikhail's crime, teaching his students to think critically about numbers, statistics that didn't match the glorious production reports. In Stalin's Soviet Union, truth itself was treason. The Gulag archipelago awaited a chain of death camps scattered across the frozen wasteland. Camp 47 materialized like a nightmare from the blizzard. Barbed wire stretched endlessly under searchlights that never slept. Guards with dead eyes herded new arrivals through gates bearing the cruel mockery. Labor will set you free. Mikhail clutched his meager possessions, a photograph of his wife, Anna, and their unborn child he'd never hold. The barracks reeked of death and despair. Skeletal figures lay on wooden planks, their hollow eyes reflecting years of systematic dehumanization. "Don't trust anyone," whispered Dmitri, a former engineer reduced to skin and bones. "Here, a crust of bread can cost you your soul." But Mikhail refused to believe that humanity could be so easily extinguished. Dawn brought the sound of boots on frozen ground. Brigade formation. Guards counted living skeletons like inventory. Mikhail's assignment, logging in temperatures that could kill within minutes. The quota was impossible: cut 15 trees, or forfeit your bread ration. This wasn't punishment. This was calculated murder, disguised as labor. On his third day, Mikhail witnessed something that changed everything. An old man collapsed while hauling timber, blood-staining the pristine snow. Instead of helping, prisoners walked past in silence. Fear had murdered their compassion. That night, staring at the photograph of Anna, Mikhail made a decision that would define the next decade of his existence. "My name is Mikhail Volkov," he whispered to the man in the next bunk. "I was a teacher." It was a small act of rebellion, maintaining identity in a system designed to erase it. Slowly, others began sharing their stories. A doctor, a farmer, a poet. Each night, they reconstructed their humanity one memory at a time, creating invisible resistance against the machinery of oppression. Winter claimed the weak without mercy. Bodies disappeared into mass graves beyond the wire. But Mikhail noticed something: the guards missed the stronger prisoners, shared scraps with the dying, not from weakness, but from strength. Love persisted even here, in this frozen hell designed to prove that compassion was merely bourgeois sentiment. Year 2 brought a discovery that would sustain Mikhail through the darkest moments ahead. Hidden beneath his bunk's loose floorboard, previous prisoners had carved messages. "Anna Kozlova, remember me. Pavel lived here. God sees everything." This secret testament proved that hope refused to die, even when buried beneath ice and silence. The camp's cruelest weapon wasn't cold or hunger, it was despair. Mikhail watched strong men surrender to hopelessness, accepting death as mercy. But he began something dangerous, teaching mathematics in whispered voices after lights out. Numbers became poetry, equations became prayers. Knowledge, they discovered, was the one thing guards couldn't confiscate. By year 3, Mikhail's nighttime school had 20 students. A former priest taught literature, reciting Pushkin from memory. A farmer shared botanical wisdom. They created an invisible university within hell's walls, proving that education could survive even systematic attempts at intellectual murder. Learning became their daily act of defiance. The guards noticed something troubling: these prisoners retained dignity despite everything. Commissar Petrov, a man whose cruelty was legendary, summoned Mikhail to his office. "You're teaching them hope," he accused. "Hope is counter-revolutionary." But Mikhail smiled, understanding something Petrov never could. Hope isn't taught, it's remembered. Punishment was swift and merciless. Solitary confinement in a concrete box barely large enough for a human body. No light, no warmth, minimal food. Designed to break minds within days. But in that darkness, Mikhail made his greatest discovery. Memory was unlimited space. He reconstructed every lesson he'd ever taught, every student's face, every moment with Anna. Emerging from solitary after 2 weeks, Mikhail found his underground school had continued without him. Students had become teachers, passing knowledge like sacred flames. The invisible university had evolved into something powerful, a community bound, not by walls and wire, but by shared commitment to preserving human dignity against impossible odds. Years blended into an endless white nightmare. Prisoners died and were replaced by new victims of Stalin's paranoia. But Mikhail's school endured, adapting, growing. They memorized poems, mathematical theorems, historical dates, creating living libraries that no amount of brutality could destroy. Culture survived in whispered words and shared dreams. Year 7 brought devastating news through smuggled letters. Anna had died in childbirth. Their son, lost to guards, watched Mikhail expecting collapse, waiting for despair to claim another victim. Instead, something extraordinary happened. His fellow prisoners surrounded him, sharing their own losses, creating a family from broken souls. The realization hit like lightning. This was why totalitarian systems feared human connection above all else. Isolated individuals could be controlled, but communities of care were revolutionary. Every act of kindness, every shared meal, every whispered lesson was a declaration that love remained stronger than the machinery designed to destroy it. Stalin's death in 1953 brought whispers of change, but camp life continued its brutal rhythm. Hope was dangerous. Too many had been destroyed by false promises of freedom. Yet Mikhail began planning something unprecedented, documenting everything: names, stories, the invisible university's lessons. Truth demanded witnesses, and witnesses demanded survivors. Memory became Mikhail's obsession. Every night, he mentally cataloged another day's horrors and humanities: guard brutality and prisoner kindness, systematic murder and spontaneous mercy. All of it needed recording. In his mind, he constructed a vast archive, the Gulag Archipelago's untold story, waiting for the world to listen. Year 10 arrived with unexpected news: rehabilitation for suspected prisoners. Mikhail's name appeared on a list that seemed too good to believe. After a decade of frozen hell, the gates that had swallowed so many lives might actually open. But freedom brought its own terror. How do you return to a world that permitted such evil? The train journey home reversed his arrival's nightmare. But Mikhail wasn't the same man who'd entered the Gulag. He carried within him thousands of stories. Faces of the dead, lessons learned in humanity's darkest classroom. The invisible university lived in his memory, demanding to be shared with a world that had forgotten what happened behind the wire. His village had changed. Friends were strangers. Strangers wore friends' faces. Fear still ruled. Paranoia still poisoned conversations. But Mikhail possessed something powerful: the knowledge that even in history's darkest chapter, human dignity had survived. The school he'd create would teach more than mathematics. It would teach the miracle of endurance. Subscribe to our channel to discover more incredible stories of human survival and courage that inspire millions worldwide. Years later, Mikhail stood before new students, no longer teaching mere equations but life's most profound lessons. The Gulag Archipelago had tried to murder hope. Instead, it had forged something unbreakable: the understanding that love conquers even systematic evil. His story spread beyond the village, inspiring millions to remember that darkness never has the final word. In every act of kindness, every defense of truth, every choice to hope, despite evidence, Mikhail's invisible university continued its eternal lesson. Humanity's greatest triumph isn't avoiding suffering, but transforming it into wisdom that lights the way for others. This story is inspired by the real experiences of millions who survived Stalin's labor camps, whose courage continues to inspire generations worldwide. Tell us which country or city you're watching from. See you in the next video. Bye.